Hi, that pigeon's going again. Hello, everybody. Uh, Last week I suggested that we might want to think about not just looking at the Gospels. In this team, we're very good at the Gospels, but that we might skip over and start and look at the Epistles. And then I was on my Boris walk going down Pump House Lane, and I thought, that means that we're all going to be looking at Romans. And to be honest, Romans is not a particularly easy epistle to read. In fact, you'll notice as you go through the epistles, they get shorter and shorter. So you've got 16 chapters, including a load of greetings at the end. So I thought, well, I probably ought to say something about it. Well, the first thing to say is with the epistles, have a look at the introduction. Because what the introduction will do is it will help you to understand what's going to happen in the rest of the epistle, the sort of topics and subjects that are going to be covered, and a little bit maybe even as to where Paul is wanting to go. Secondly, when you read the epistles, you have to understand that the issues that Paul or Peter or James want to address are live issues. They're not just plucking them out of the air. So they're going to be specific to the particular Christian community that they're talking to. Sometimes you can get the idea that the early church was mega wonderful. It was full of lots of holy people and not like today. When you read the epistles, you find that's not the case. If people were coming off a Jewish background, they had the Old Testament. If they weren't, they didn't have anything at all. No Christian basis, no Christian background. And there was no New Testament for them to read. So everything is coming fresh. They've essentially come into the church because of preaching and because of miracles. And there they are, gathered together. They've had essentially their equivalent of an alpha, where they've experienced God, they've seen God move on people, they've heard something of the basics of the faith. But how does it all come together? They haven't got any new material to read. They're hearing stories about Jesus, and they're getting teaching from Christian leaders who are being Spirit-led. The Holy Spirit is leading them to say what they're going to say. And once you've got that background, you begin to understand how these letters came to be and where they're going. And where Paul is going with the Romans is, hello. I know that Rome is the most important place in the world. I'm a Roman citizen. Rome is the place. But there's already a church there, so I don't really want to come and see you because I don't want to build on somebody else's foundation. I'd much rather go to Spain. But if I can pop in and see you on the way, that's going to be great. Here's the thing. I want to help you to understand the transition between being good Jews and being good Christians. Because there's been a Christian community in Rome since at least the 2nd century BC. And I think that the people who've come to faith and brought the faith to Rome were actually people who've picked it up in Palestine and travelled back with it. In other words, they're Jewish people. And so you've got a Jewish Christian community that needs to transition to being a Jew and Gentile Christian community to transition to be just a Christian community. Jews and Gentiles, it doesn't matter which is which. And so you'll see Paul take his readers through that journey. And in chapter 12, you then get to a sort of a so what point. Therefore, in view of God's mercy, what are we going to do? And for a short while, Paul is going to talk about that before the letter moves towards its conclusion. And another issue which will come up as a live issue is going to be, what do you do about food? This doesn't seem a particularly relevant issue to us. We just eat stuff. But perhaps in this age where more people are talking about veganism and vegetarianism and about animal cruelty, the food we eat and the meaning of the food we eat becomes more significant. Well, it was certainly significant then, but it was to do with the fact that the meat that you bought at the market had often been sacrificed to some sort of god or goddess or nymph or spirit or whatever. In other words, it had had religious prayers said over it, dedicating it to another god. And the big question was, do we eat something that's been dedicated to another god? And Paul grapples with this. His base point is, well, if we give thanks to it, we can reconsecrate it to a much more powerful God, the Lord God Almighty, through Jesus Christ, and therefore it's not going to matter. And this is the origin of us saying grace at meal times. We're there to consecrate the food to God, so that if it's been dedicated to anything else, that will be null and void. And we will gain both physical and spiritual benefit by eating it. So there you are. Romans. In a very small nutshell. I have squirrels nipping about my lawn at the moment, still looking for last year's acorns. And hopefully what I can do is to try and broadcast a few acorn-size epistles. So maybe next time I'll start talking about Corinth. The church at Corinth doesn't just give us one epistle, it gives us two. And there's a lot of controversy along the way.